Welcome to Sean's Thoughts with Shone, that's me with a W. Thank you for joining me today. Actually, what I'm doing, and I don't know if this is going to be able to be seen wherever, but this live stream that I'm doing right now, I guess they call them podcasts now or live streams. Anyways, I had actually scheduled it, and so this is my first scheduled live stream in which I had a really good idea of what I was wanting to talk about, the topic that is, and so I posted that. If you've had the opportunity in the comments the description, there's a video, and this is the video that's kind of in a sense prompted what I wanted to discuss today. And so I'm excited to be here with you, especially after my yesterday's live stream where I was so excited because I was talking about my favorite subject, which is love. And so I hope you'll have an opportunity to go back and check out that, especially if you're interested in love, because anyways, I won't, no spoilers, I'll just let you go and do that. So today, as I said, I wanted to talk about what was in the video that I watched yesterday. And the video is linked, and what the video has to do is it has to do with, it's in a sense a documentary about world history and perhaps true world history. See, I've known for quite a bit of time that things out there when I was growing up and in reality, it just didn't seem right. The answers that I was given just seemed to be having holes and missing things, and I really, really wanted to know more. And so even when I was in school, for example, back in high school, I would spend my lunch hours in the library learning more. I wouldn't be hanging out with the kids doing whatever they were doing. I would be wanting to utilize that time to learn more. And even often when I was working on my writing projects, I would spend an awful lot of time learning about whatever it is that I was called to learn about. Like, when I was younger, or not younger, but high school, I was borrowing textbooks from university just to read them. Perhaps I didn't necessarily understand the concepts and stuff yet, but I just enjoyed reading information and learning. And through all that learning, I kind of discovered that things didn't add up. Not just how the political system worked and perhaps even the financial at a younger age, but definitely the political, because there's a lot of adults always talking about different things to do with that. So I would overhear them, read the newspapers. There was the Surrey Leader that I read. And so, I was always absorbing information, and it didn't all seem like aligned with one another. And that's what, I guess in a sense, impressed me about this video that I watched, is it took a lot of the information that I had previously been aware of with regards to our history, and it put, or more importantly, it connected the dots. Sorry, I was just pulling up the sleeping bag. It's cold. As I said, I like being outside in the fresh air versus being inside. And right now it's quite cold. Probably not as cold as the north, the real north, the Alaska and stuff like that. But nonetheless, it's still cold for us out here. So, as I was mentioning, this video that I was watching, it put together a lot of the different dots that I was aware of. See, I'm aware of architecture throughout our planet that doesn't seem to be like it should be there. And while they do have excuses and stories of why those buildings are or who built them, it kind of leaves holes and questions that I want to answer. And so that answer is that, or the possible answer to that anyways, is a vast empire that encapsulated the whole entire planet. Like, we're told stories about, for instance, the Roman Empire, of how it was able to, be spread across a large portion of the world. And then we're told stories about the British Empire and how that basically was an empire from sunset to down, sun up to sundown kind of idea, that they encapsulated a large portion or almost all of the earth that we are aware of. And so the idea of empires existing to have that great of a control or a vast expanse of dominion is and has been possible in our past. So to now, yes, I understand that those ones are known of and this one isn't, but it still leaves the evidence that there are buildings like this. And there's also other odd occurrences of that I'm aware of. There was this one man named John Levy. He has a an amazing YouTube channel. Actually, he quite inspired me. And anyways, he has this YouTube channel in which he explores all of these different photographs, like these real world photographs from around the world, people sending him stuff, and he does an analysis on them. And there is a lot of evidence that there are a considerable amount of different things on our planet that are unexplained. For instance, underwater pyramids off the coast of Japan, underwater city off the coast of India. And I mean, like, these are underwater and big sized things. Like, I think the pyramid in Japan, from the images that I saw on the video, it appears quite large and it's immersed deep underwater. So that shows us that things are a lot different on the surface of our planet. And so therefore it once again adds to the possibility of, was there some sort of larger empire? And more importantly, I feel, to do with this video, is it takes that idea of an unknown or a deleted empire from our planet. It shows evidence for it in a sense of the pictures, but it also shows evidence of something that's far more important, I feel. And that's the picture evidence that at one time large areas of the city were empty, and that they were able to take pictures of these large cities and them being empty, meaning that, of course, they're alluding to that these cities were empty. And, you know, that's once again another thing. Well, how could they have been empty? And, well, the answer could possibly be that all the people were out of them. But of course, it could also be that they were literally pictures taken, perhaps even the pictures themselves, as postcards or advertisements to lure people to come live there. Like, that's just one idea that I suddenly came up with, because it's a possibility as well, especially when you consider the fact that China itself, from my understanding, has constructed entire cities from like the beginning until it being a city in shorter expanses of time. And there are some of these cities that it still exist over in China that are completely empty. And they're empty in modern times when people are looking for home. So there are either construction projects or abandoned cities. And in China, for instance, these cities appear to be like modern day cities that are abandoned. And of course, therefore, it leads to, in the possibility, maybe in the past there was some sort of reason to abandon a city, or there was some sort of system of how they moved people around the planet. See, me, myself, and I have come to the understanding that even Canada has a history of repopulation. And that was a real dominant theme in that video, was not just alluding to, but exposing that there are, or were perhaps, repopulation schemes. And why I think this is a super big, important topic, and I guess one worthy of conversation should it turn out to be true. And the more and more researchers who actually are beginning to document and publish all of their videos on Tartaria and things like that. Now, what is Tartaria? Well, we'll leave that for you to go look on videos of yourself. However, we'll shorten just an explanation for this particular topic, is that Tartaria seems to have been a global empire that was somehow purposely erased from our history. And that, well, I'll add into that just before I continue on to that. I want to also highlight a comment that is on that video. And that comment talks about there being a hidden World War One, that we have already went through 3 world wars. And this post, and it's, you can go into the comments of that video yourself and read the whole thing, but he actually details the events of World War One, and that being considerably more before what we know as World War One, but then two, in essentially our World War One, or our Great War, is, in his opinion, the Second World War, and then the third one came as when our World War Two happened. And that these events, in a sense, our history has been rewritten to exclude the true World War One, where he, I think in the video, in the comments, he said it was around 1780-ish. But like I said, considerably more before what we're deeming World War One to be. And so it got me into thinking a lot of different possibilities. And once again, that's kind of like how I would prefer, as I'm doing my research, is to come across the different possibilities. And the different possibilities are that something happened in World War One. Now, this is me just kicking, talking about stuff, but that something happened in World War One that was so devastating to the world's population that they essentially had to transport tons of orphans. And see, in the video, it kind of alludes to that these babies that were created in those incubating machines, and I've heard more than just that one video about this, but that they were actually mixed in with society. And if they weren't mixed in with society in that sense, like created and then people purchased them, it almost seems like. And I think, like, for me, that idea of babies being born in incubators being a possibility, I think, a long time ago I might not have been able to accept or understand that. However, as I do see that our actual true history is considerably longer and larger and more futuristic than we're aware of, I can definitely see how the possibility of that happening. And therefore, I truly did understand the video, in the sense that they were, like, towards the end of the video, the narrator mentions that they were essentially showing people technology, and they were saying it does this certain thing for the helping the unfortunate preemies and such, but that they were actually showing perhaps the beings who had already grown up, perhaps who were once created from those machines, and then bringing them to fairs and actually showing them where they came from, but then, telling them a different story about it. So if any of those people had different memories surface, they could then therefore relate it to, oh, that must have been what I saw when I went to the fair. I always feel, and it's not being suspect of everyone, but I always feel there's always a reason why certain things are done, or the way people say and ask questions, even that you can ask questions in a way that you have an agenda for what you want, or what you're truly trying to find the answer to be. If that makes sense. I've had an awful lot of that, even a little more so recently, people asking me questions in a way that they were looking for a different answer than they were saying they were. But anyways, so back on to that video. It kind of made me, I don't know, it took my mind for a little bit of a loop, because, see, I recognize that forgiveness is, like, super important. And when I say, like, super important, I mean it is super important. And I'm also aware that, perhaps we have, I say aware than perhaps, but I'm aware, or perhaps it's better to say I believe that we have had past lives. Like incarnation is supposedly something that we do experience. And with that in mind, well, most of our memories are erased or blocked somehow when we reincarnate, that we are able to carry over certain things, certain perhaps memories, or you could kind of say that maybe the simulation isn't perfect. It doesn't fully block out stuff. Perhaps that's because it's been ongoing for such a long time that the technology that's being used, maybe it's not even being used by the people who originally created it. And so therefore, like I've heard that the technology on the moon that somehow works alongside our reality that we live on, that technology itself is pretty old and it's been breaking down, and that's why the structure or the level of society isn't universal around the entire planet. That technology that helps, a sense, helps us project what they want us to project, that it's been breaking down as the centuries have went by. And so therefore places like North America and Western Europe are more of not the civilized, but more of the spread out, contained through democracy and capitalism societies, versus other places the technology isn't being rained down from the moon or projected from the moon in the same way it is. But anyways, so that let's go all the way back to the video that I was talking about. I don't know how I go off on some of my tangents. So this idea is that there was a rather large empire, and one of the ideas that I came across was that what if these children were actually the children of the Tartarian Empire? See, if you've seen a movie called Jupiter Ascending, in the beginning of the movie, it tells about a race of people called the Abraxas. And the Abraxas were, from my understanding of the material presented by Kim, the Abraxas were the first version of human. Human 1.0 maybe is the way that I understand it. Now, I'm saying that that's the way I understand what I've heard, because I can't relate her exact words, because there's a lot of GIA reports and situation reports, but then it's also mixed in with other information from other people that I've heard. So keep in mind, the stuff that I say isn't necessarily fact. It's what I am understanding enough to share, because there are some things that I listen to that I have to listen to 3 or 4 or 5 times to fully appreciate or understand what I'm saying. So anyways, this movie called Jupiter Ascending, it starts off by showing the Abraxas just after they have harvested an entire planet. And they even show a little kid's toy, meaning that they just eliminated the whole entire planet for the sake of their energy. And there's other parts in the movie as well where they show their reptilian army, and that's representative of the Draco reptilian. And it's the idea that human planets are all over the place, and that on occasion these planets get harvested for the population. Now, that's how it's shown in the movie, because they need to show a physical world, something happening to a physical world. But how that harvesting happens, well, who really knows? But with this video that we were watching by this on YouTube, I don't know what to label it is, but the video that I'm talking about anyways, is it kind of alludes, in my opinion, that those people were all brought over here from somewhere. Now, that somewhere could, of course, been factories or laboratories, as we would now call them, in which they were just creating babies out of machines. Because although that definitely feels incorrect, or I don't know, I don't want to be too judgy about the words that I use, but not the right way to do it anyways. That is what I felt, that documentary was actually proposing. And that kind of was interesting because immediately it made me begin to think about the human versus Homo sapien situation. And so to give a little bit of background around that is when I was in school, we learned that the Latin word Homo sapien, that word was synonymous with the word human. Now, I don't know the actual acronym off the top of my head, but I've come to understand that human is more of an overlay or more of an artificial thing, and the Homo sapien is more of the organic. And that perhaps there was a time when we coexisted, knowingly coexisted, knowing who we are, and perhaps they knew who they were, and that we lived together. This kind of showed me a couple different possibilities, and one of them being that these beings were created artificially somehow, not biologically, and that they were inserted into normal civilization. They were into the normal people's population, and they were, from how I saw in the video, more of sold as a product. And so creating it that they, insinuating that they were artificially created and they were just trying to sell something. And then years later, in order to erase that memory of it, they're showing them the people who grew up as artificially created in fairs. Anyways, the actual video itself, like, I just, even as I sit here and remember or recall what I was experiencing when I watched that, I found that there was just so much, as I said, dots being connected by things that I was already previously aware of. And I feel that this video, if I hold on to the word if this video is true, then it's presented in such a soft way but truthful way that I think it's a great video for, I guess, part of, like, if there was a course on awakening, this would be a great video for that, if, like I said, this was true. But it makes sense with what I know about the repopulation of Canada. I've talked previously about how I felt that prior to Canada being formed in 1867 as a country, I feel there was already a presence of people living in British Columbia, for example. And I've always seen those people as being Chinese and Japanese because there was a large population of Chinese and Japanese prior to Canada becoming Canada. Like, I even went to a graveyard in my own city, and this is quite western in Western Canada near the Rockies, and there was an awful lot of Japanese people in that graveyard. There was a whole area dedicated to them, and to see graves from in my city, which supposedly only just was being colonized by the British, and yet there's graves that were older than that all here. And now there's of course probably reasons and stories and all that lovely stuff, but it just even kind of opened my mind up to that there were a civilization living here before the whole British Columbia became part of Canada thing. And it leads me to often think about that, of all the different stories that have to be held up together in order to get us to believe something. So now I'm going to stop that right there, and I want to talk about what I just started previously to talk about, was why is all this important? And I feel it's important because I feel it's a common feeling anyways when I go through comments and watch all these different people's videos, that there is a large consensus that our history isn't true, yet we keep being told by our so-called leaders, which selected themselves into power, that it isn't true, and yet we all feel it's true. It's all, I don't want to speak for everyone, but like I said, the people that I've communicated, at least on one level, that they believe that there is some sort of lie being told. And honestly, when we live with even accepting a little bit of a lie, it kind of opens us up to absorbing the rest of the lie as well. Because if we're all individually holding on to part of a lie, then collectively, when we're together, we're actually holding on together all of the lie. And so I'm not a very big advocate on white lies. I believe being as truthful as possible will basically illuminate truthfulness in all. I don't know if that makes much sense, but it sounds good. So, with that being said, the reason why having these discussions and getting down to the truth of our history is important is because it allows us to increase our awareness of what really did happen. I've often talked about there's a lot of different grievances and grievances is the wrong word. There's basically a lot of hate out there between people, between peoples, countries, like especially a lot of these countries that have had wars with one another, that there is a history. And if we learn that our history is different than what we think, that allows us to perhaps easily have an easier time moving on from it. Not just forgiving it, but healing the traumas that we had, knowing that what our history isn't what actually happened. One of the case in points that I often mention is we've had this idea of within especially the African American black rap music more so, but anyways, the rap music, might use the word wrong, but that there has been 400 years of problems or racism between white and black people, for example. And yet, one of the things I was aware of is in prior to the 1900s, so I think it was 1898 was the last year maybe, there was African Americans, or we'll just not even say African American, there were black men in Congress of the United States of America. And yet we're told that, a lot of other things based on the revolutions of the 60s. And so that one part to me, as well as the knowledge that there was more than just black slaves working on the cotton fields, there was white slaves as well, that our world isn't even just that one part, like labor contracts or selling people into slavery. People perhaps by some were seen more as a commodity. And that's where I even go back to the video itself, as that they were putting babies in incubators, and in a sense, it was a commodity, it was an asset to be sold. And so just that opens us up to realize that even in the cotton fields, labor contracts were more seen as I own you and I pay for all the stuff you need. And with the idea of slavery, we know that, they do control their workers with force, and therefore they would harm them and hurt them because they'd see them as more as product. And that information just helps us to see that there's already different things being disclosed. Now, when we have a greater understanding of who was in power, so for instance, with this entire, helping us forget for whatever purpose, whatever reason, they're wanting us to not remember this vast empire who is now apparently parliament buildings and different structures. Like apparently Prague was, if you want to see images of one of the more condensed buildings, apparently Prague is one of them. So back to how does this all help? Well, it helps because if we can uncover more of our true truth, like our true history, then we can start to see that there are agendas throughout the planet. And when we're able to see that there is a group of people that facilitated this forgettingness. See, I was told that a lot of the wars that happened in World War II so were staged across Europe, were in areas that had large, amounts of these Tartarian buildings, and that these wars were staged in areas where the destruction essentially was going to allow for the later rebuilding, or basically covering up these different buildings. And that even there was a video done by Emissary recently in which she showed that there's Tartarian technology perhaps, or some sort of structures near Niagara Falls, and that the falls themselves somehow add to the cover up of this empire. And yeah, so I keep getting off away from how does this help. Well, I think it is self-evident that if what we know about our history and our grievances against each other wasn't real, and then it was somehow contrived, put together, created, the narrative was written down, the actors came out, they read the scripts, they clapped their hands in front of cameras when there was cameras, in front of pencils and pens and paper when that was the way of sending the information. But perhaps even prior to that, there was Facebook 300 years ago, maybe. I've heard that the Tartarian Empire also had video phones. But if we recognize that there was a hidden layer of society that still knows that these things exist, secret societies that hide the secrets of our true path, and that if there's in fact all of the secret and secret societies being true, and that they are hiding a real history from us, well then right there that shows that we not only have a lot to learn, but more importantly we have a lot to learn about our real past. And that will help us and relieve of us about a lot of the things that we're holding traumas with today. So for instance, if there's a group of people who believe that the area they're living on has been their natural land space for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and yet they then discover that, oh no, there was a whole new empire living here before, and that I have been essentially programmed by media and other tools and different projects. I'm not going to start spitting out a whole bunch of different names of different projects, but that I haven't been here for all that time, then there isn't such a that feeling that you own the land and that there needs to be a resistance in order to maintain it. One of the stories that I heard about the history of the Caucasian people is that they used to come from the Ireland or Scotland area, or somewhere that northern part, and that they were essentially enslaved, and they were then later went on to enslave the rest, but that prior to that enslavement that they had a culture, and that culture was more akin to or the traditional pagan style of a culture. Like if you look at the Indian culture, or the native Aboriginal, well, whether it's Australian or Canada, that the Africans, that they all have their native cultures, and then they have their modern cultures. Well, it's often been said that the Caucasian people don't have as much of a culture, but yet that supposedly was our original culture. And I say our because I am Caucasian, or at least my birth certificate was labeled that way. And so that's where our culture came from. And it often, it's easy to then make that jump to realize, oh, well, that's why they used certain days to label the birth of Christ, for example, why they used that day, when so many have said, well, that's not the day that his birth happened, but yet half the world for some reason continues on celebrating that day for that happening. And that other things like Easter is supposedly somehow related to Esther, and Esther was a goddess of fertility and a belief in the pagan community. So once again, putting that other significant day on another day, which is represented, or which was a day that was not celebrated, but revered, maybe. So, yeah. So coming back to all of this stuff is, how does all this help us? Well, when we analyze, when we recognize, when we realize that things aren't the way we were told back then, or for at all, like our whole entire history has been altered in some sort of way, then we can also then start looking around at our world now and say, okay, well, what in our world isn't, like, what doesn't make sense? And as these so-called ruling families of Earth that are basically getting their pink slips right now, as per Kim Gogan, and she didn't say that exactly, so I'm just like, she updates us in her reports about all the different things that the deep state is losing for their control over our planet. And so in a sense, they're losing their jobs as controllers, or word did she use? Management. They're losing their control over the management of Earth, which of course is going to set up and open up a lot of the, or delete a lot of the insanities that I have noticed all my life. And a lot of the things that, like I said, just didn't make sense. Why do we keep electing the same people every year and we keep complaining about them at the same time? Well, all that made sense when I understood the power that we have when we're complaining. Not just the power we have when we're complaining, but the power that we have, period. Like the energy we've had. I've seen these videos of this man, I think his name was Master Shifu, but he, or was that from Kung Fu Panda? And see, that's the thing, is you put true history, you mix it up with movies so much, it kind of dilutes your ability to fully remember. But anyways, this master was able to throw his fist to knock out fire, like not just hit the fire, he would basically throw a punch and he would be able to knock out the flame. And so there are living examples of there's a lot of people that have power. I don't know why I'm going off on all this stuff. I just, once again, I got into thinking about one thing, and then I started seeing Kung Fu Panda go off course of what I wanted to say. But anyways, there's a lot of things out there that perhaps we're going to start reestablishing our ability to do. And as I've mentioned again and again, and I'll mention again, I really do believe and hope that change is coming really soon, and that a lot of amazing things are going to happen, and we're going to get to know more truth, and then that'll help with our getting over grudges and learning to forgive everyone and building that love, that awesome topic that I had yesterday. Like I said, if you love love, go back and listen to that audio. Actually, in all honesty, I would highly recommend spaced repetition for anything that you find value when you find information. See, oftentimes when you listen to something over again, it's almost like there's a whole new cognition sometimes, because you could have been distracted the first time, you could have missed something. Sometimes when I'm listening to something, I start trailing off in thoughts of what I'm listening to, and I miss what I'm actually listening to only later to pick it up and just continue on. And so a lot of times, if you take space in between listening to something, you often can find that you'll get something new from it. And sometimes it'll feel like a whole new, I don't want to say lesson, but a whole new report, or anyways, it'll be almost as if new information was added. So whenever you find something that you really resonated with, definitely go back and re-experience it, because there might be something, sometimes I think, a further level to unlock. It's like when you play a game, you might have level one, like you might have the same level being able to be multiple times played, and each time it perhaps can have the difficulty increased, and then the reward for completing it is increased, and that you can kind of see as any type of motivational audio or informational audio or historical audio. But anyways, any type of audio, you can gain more from it. So definitely take opportunity to do that. So concluding on all this, thank you so much for listening. I just wanted to say that again. I truly appreciate it. And now concluding on the whole conversation. See, it's not about whether or not all of what this video proposes is true or not. So it's not to get into the semantics of this is true and this is not, or this couldn't be because God would never allow that to happen, or like just some sort of block that really doesn't, it leaves holes to an argument, like just blindsiding what someone says because I don't like one part of it. It's more important that it's about realizing that the world hasn't given us accurate, and I say the world hasn't given us, I do really mean it's almost as if the truth has been purposely concealed. And that's why a video like this coming up and connecting all those all those things that I did know about Tartaria. I did know about the Cabbage Patch connection, like something to do with Cabbage Patch. I did know about orphan trains. I did know about orphanages. I'm aware of human trafficking. I'm aware of Homo sapiens versus humans. I'm aware of a lot of these things, and when you have a video such as this and it just kind of builds it up like almost like Lego, it got repetitive in some places because it was building up these ideas to truly solidify the possibility that all or some of this stuff could be true. And any of it being true, because any of it is going to require that there is a part of our history that has been concealed. And if there is a part of that history that maintains that concealment, or at least they did up until at least 2020 pretty well, that means there is a group of people that on our planet, depending on how many, some people say 1%, some people say less, but there is a large group of people on our planet that are concealing the truth from at least us, at least the ones not knowing it. And that shows us that there is something beyond that is worthy enough to hold us within a lie. And as I said before, any type of relationship where lies are held on to, that just creates an instability that you never really get away from. When any type of lie is held on to, whether people think it's for the good of the whole or any of that stuff, well, you're holding an artificial structure in place, energetic structure as well, and that energy just is still always just going to be there, and it'll be negative, and yeah, you can move it around, and I don't need to deal with it now, I can deal with it later. Nonetheless, that energy still affects everything else. And so, as I was mentioning before, I'm a large advocate of just truth, not white lies to make people feel better. And there's a lot of those in society where people think it's okay to lie. You're saving someone's feelings, you're doing this or that. But in the end, all of those just come together in order to hide the bigger lie that we're living, and that is that a lot of the things that we accept in our daily life, they really don't need to be there. And I think that we're going to start to see that. We're going to start to see that collapse of people accepting the lies. Like one important lie is, well, taxes, but gas taxes. Like, that's a huge lie. The cost of gas that we pay is a lie. During the 2020 situation, they were still producing so much gas that they apparently had to give it away, like pay people to take it. And yet when the gas was coming to us, we were still paying more because we were being told stories about shipping problems and production problems, when there was so much of it that, they just wanted to get rid of it because they wanted to continue keeping their production up. And so therefore they actually had to pay people to take it, and then those people profited off of a lot more, because during here we went from gas when I was in my 20s to be like 59 cents, and then we go all the way up to almost 229, and yet nothing changed. They made a lot more, actually, so that did change. So anyways, I hope you've enjoyed your time with me, and I hope that this has been something constructive. And it's not the end all of everything that there is. And as I said, there's, other than this video, which I definitely encourage you to share your attention with, there's not that I'm putting out proof and saying that this is how it was. It's just, if we can get into more conversations about these things that don't look like they should be. You know, they have this little advertisement on the trains now: if you see something, say something. Well, perhaps if we're more open and willing to actually get into conversations about this stuff without saying, oh no, you're wrong because I know this, and listening to the possibilities of what our history was, even though the history is pretty dark when you truly consider the possibilities that this video infers to. Nonetheless, if we're able to discover that our history is considerably different from what we have been led to believe, then we can detach from any type of trauma that we were sold that we had. However, at the same point in time, we have to realize that as we learn more about our history, we're learning more about the lives we perhaps once lived, and the situations or the events that we were part of. And maybe this whole process that we're going through is essentially to prepare us, and sometimes I wonder, to prepare me for the remembrance of past lives, of the things that we participated in on both sides, perhaps. One of the stories that I had heard, see, I thought it was going to end and then I didn't. One of the stories that I heard is that during the flood that ended Atlantis, when Atlantis went down, that the people that were on, for example, the beach that day didn't even realize they had died, that they were there. Then the flood happened so fast that even after their bodies perhaps were washed away, they themselves still believed themselves to be there. And I can, with my understanding of things, I can totally see how that's possible for the amount of the world that we create. Perhaps they hadn't even consciously left their bodies. They say that the body can actually survive for a short amount of time, in which that time they can put in stuff and do stuff, but that there's a time between when the body and maybe the soul are separating. And so I can totally see that if a wave happens so fast, that those people could still see themselves standing there, although they had passed away. And that perhaps actually in this book that I was reading, it's asserted that is that our past lives may not even know that they're dead yet. And that us learning now and remembering our past lives in Atlantis are going to allow our other fractals of us to perhaps let go. I can feel my throat getting sore from all this talking, so I'm not going to go down that story, but I'm sure one day I'll talk about that, and perhaps I'll talk to the author directly, because the information she asserted within her books is freaking fantastic. I don't know why I said freaking, but is fantastic. And yeah, so thank you for sharing your Sunday sunny afternoon with me, and this below 2 temperature that I'm in. I know some people are probably a lot lower than that and a lot colder than that, but I'm sitting outside holding my little microphone, enjoying it. So thank you so much for sharing your time with my rocks and I. And I really do hope you value something or get something from the stuff that I said. And if you could share with me what you think that is, that would be awesome. Keep one thing in mind When I do these live streams, I do them from a phone, so I'm not actually able to see the comments while I'm doing the stream. And so if you've said things or asked questions here, please put them in the comments of the video after, and it'll help me see them. So thank you very much. I love you, and I love, and have a wonderful day, and thank you.